No logo, no return address, no explanation. Just my name scrawled on the front in bold, almost angry-looking letters. Who was that? Jessica's voice floated from the hallway. She wasn't supposed to be home? Her Friday mornings were usually packed with yoga classes. Wrong house, I muttered, shoving the envelope into my pocket, but she soon appeared in the doorway. Her hair was damp, and her cheeks were flushed, as if she'd rushed through a shower. She smiled at me quickly before heading to the kitchen. I watched her closely, my heart pounding harder than usual. For some reason, I felt uneasy. After she was out of sight, I retreated to my office, closed the door behind me, and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were 3 photographs. The first showed Jessica laughing with a man I didn't recognize at her office. They were standing close, too close. Her hand was on his arm, and his head was tilted in that intimate way people do when they're sharing a secret. The second photo was darker, grainy, as if it had been taken at night outside a restaurant. Jessica and the same man stood near a car, her hand on his chest. The way she smiled at him in that photo made my stomach turn. But it was the third image that made everything spin. Jessica and the man, hand in hand, entering a hotel room marked 204. I stared at the pictures for what seemed like hours, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. A flood of questions overwhelmed me. Was this real? Who sent these? Was I losing my mind? The sound of footsteps shook me from my daze. Jessica was coming upstairs. Without thinking, I quickly stuffed the photos back into the envelope and slipped it under a stack of papers on my desk. "Hey!" she called out, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm heading out to meet Kelly for dinner. Don't wait up, okay?" She was lying. I could tell. Her voice was too casual, her smile too perfect. "Okay," I replied, my voice distant. As soon as she left, I grabbed the envelope again and looked at the photos once more. My mind raced, each thought darker than the last. Something told me this was just the beginning. I made up my mind right then. I wasn't going to just sit back and let this happen without answers. Whoever sent these photos wanted me to do something, and I wasn't going to disappoint them. The chase was on. That night, I couldn't sleep. The photos lay on the desk, like a live wire, mocking me with their silence. I looked through them over and over again, hoping to find something I'd missed. A clue, a reflection, anything that could shed light on what was happening. At 2 a.m., I did the only thing that seemed logical. I called my friend Mike. Mike wasn't just a regular friend. He was a private investigator. We'd met years ago when he helped a coworker track down her ex-husband, who disappeared with her savings. He was sharp, relentless, and discreet. The perfect person for this situation. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" He groaned when he answered. "I wouldn't call if it wasn't important," I whispered. "Mike, I think Jessica's cheating on me." There was a long pause, and I wondered if he'd gone back to sleep. Then his tone shifted, becoming professional. "Tell me everything." I spilled it all. The strange package, the photos, the growing distance between us in recent months. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd run a marathon. "All right," Mike said. "First step, don't confront her yet. If she's lying, she'll cover her tracks better. You want proof? You wait." "What do I do in the meantime?" I asked. "You give me a description of the guy, the hotel name, anything else you've got. I'll take it from here." The next day, while Jessica was working late, I met Mike at a diner on the outskirts of town. He was already there, a well-worn leather notebook open in front of him. I handed him the photos and he scrutinized them. "Yeah, looks like a corporate thing," he muttered, pointing to the man's tie, which bore a company logo. "Any chance she knows this guy from work?" "I don't know," I admitted. "She talks about her coworkers sometimes, but not in detail." Mike made a note. "I'll run his face through some tools to see if I can get a name." He paused, then added, "You said you found these on your porch." "Yeah, that's the part that bugs me," I replied. "Someone wanted you to see these," Mike said, leaning back in his chair. "Someone's playing a game, and it's not just your wife." That thought hadn't crossed my mind. I had been so caught up in the idea of betrayal that I hadn't considered the messenger's motives. Whoever they were, Mike was right. They had resources. They were watching her. Or me. Probably both. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine. Who was behind this? When I got home, Jessica was already asleep. Her purse sat on the counter, open. It felt wrong to invade her privacy, but Mike's words echoed in my mind. You want proof? You wait. I decided to check. Inside her purse, I found her phone, locked as expected. But there was also a small folded piece of paper with a number written on it. No name, just digits. I jotted it down, careful to put everything back as I had found it. The next morning, while Jessica showered, I called the number from my work phone. It rang 3 times before a man answered. Yeah? His voice was groggy, like I had woken him up. I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Hello? He said again, this time sharper. I hung up. Jessica came into the kitchen 10 minutes later, smiling as if nothing had happened. I watched her pour coffee, my mind racing. She didn't know yet, but the walls were closing in. Saturday night, I couldn't sit still. Mike had texted me earlier with an update. He'd identified the man in the photos. His name was Ryan Peterson, a mid-level manager at Jessica's company, married with 2 kids, living 2 towns over. On paper, he looked like the last person you'd expect to risk his life for an affair, but people surprise you. Then Mike dropped the real bombshell. He'd booked a room at the Holloway Grand Hotel that night, under his own name, Room 204. The same hotel from the photo. The same room. My hands started to shake as I read the message. I knew what it meant. Jessica wasn't home yet. She'd left earlier, saying she had errands to run. Now I was certain I knew exactly where she'd gone. Mike had told me to keep my distance, to let him handle it, but I couldn't. Not this time. I needed to see it for myself. I drove to the Holloway Grand just as the sun was setting, parking across the street with a clear view of the entrance. For an hour, nothing happened. People came and went, but none of them were Jessica. My mind began to spiral. Was I wrong? Was this some sort of cruel joke? Then I saw her, Jessica, walking through the front doors in a deep red dress I didn't recognize. One that clearly wasn't meant for a husband to see. She was laughing on her phone, her hair flowing over one shoulder. She looked breathtaking, and it made me sick to my stomach. A minute later, Ryan appeared. He wasn't in the photos from the package, but Mike's research had already engraved his face in my mind. Tall, with a sharp jawline and an irritating air of confidence, he greeted her with a hand resting on her lower back. They didn't linger in the lobby. No drinks, no small talk, just a quick check-in before heading straight to the elevators. My hands tightened on the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to rush in and confront them right there, but I forced myself to stay put. I needed solid proof, real proof. Once they were out of view, I got out of the car and crossed the street, the adrenaline dulling the cold wind against my skin. Inside the lobby, I kept my head low, trying to blend in as just another guest. The concierge barely noticed me as I passed. The elevator ride to the second floor felt endless. By the time the doors opened, my heart was pounding so loudly I feared it would give me away. Room 204 was at the far end of the hall. I walked past it the first time, pretending to check my phone, then doubled back, stopping just close enough to hear muffled voices. Jessica's laugh rang out, light and playful. Ryan said something in return, his voice lower, but I couldn't make out the words. I stood frozen, torn. Part of me wanted to knock, to force them to face me right then and there, but the rational part of me knew I couldn't do that yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mike. "I'm here," I whispered. "Did you see them? Are they in the room together?" There was a long pause. "Don't do anything rash," Mike said. "I'll take care of it. Go home." I didn't answer. I hung up and stood there for a few more seconds, unsure of what to do next. Then the door opened. Jessica stepped out first, her hair slightly messy, lipstick smudged at the corners. She didn't notice me. She was too busy adjusting her dress, smoothing it over her hips as Ryan followed her out. They laughed quietly, like kids sneaking out after curfew, before disappearing down the hall toward the elevator. I stayed perfectly still, my stomach in knots, rage and heartbreak warring for dominance. Proof. I had all the proof I needed now. As I turned to leave, one thought echoed in my mind. The confrontation was coming, and it was going to be explosive. The drive home was a blur. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my mind replaying the scene outside room 204 over and over like a twisted film reel. Jessica laughing, Jessica adjusting her dress, Jessica walking away with him like it was the most natural thing in the world. By the time I got home, I was no longer trembling. I was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes just before a storm. Jessica's car wasn't in the driveway, of course. She wouldn't be back for hours, maybe not until morning. But that worked in my favor. I needed time to think, to plan. This wasn't going to be some screaming match. I wanted her to feel every ounce of what I was feeling. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I set the stage. When Jessica finally walked through the door at 10 a.m. the next day, wearing the same red dress from the night before, she didn't seem surprised to find me sitting at the dining table. She barely acknowledged me. "Morning," she said, heading straight for the kitchen. I stayed silent, watching her pour herself a cup of coffee. She didn't even bother to explain where she'd been the night before. Finally, I asked, my voice steady. "Late night?" She froze for half a second before turning to face me. Her smile was carefully controlled. "Yeah, Kelly and I stayed out later than planned," she said. "You know how she gets after a couple of drinks." I nodded, letting her lie fill the space between us. "That's funny," I said. "I thought Kelly was in Chicago this weekend for her niece's birthday." Jessica blinked, her smile faltering just slightly. "Oh, right, she was. I meant Becca. Sorry. I'm so tired. I can't think straight." "Of course," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "You must be exhausted after your night at the Holloway Grand." Her face drained of color so quickly it was almost comical. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I stood, pulling the envelope from my back pocket and tossing it onto the table. The photos spilled out, spreading across the surface like evidence in a courtroom. "Room 204, I said, my voice sharp now. "Jessica, don't insult me by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about." She stared at the photos, her hands shaking as she picked one up. For a moment, I saw real panic in her eyes. Then, as if flipping a switch, she laughed. "Oh my God," she said, holding up the picture of her with Ryan outside the hotel. "This is nothing. Ryan and I went there to go over some reports in private. It's just work stuff." "Work stuff," I repeated, my voice icy. "So now work stuff involves walking out of a hotel room at midnight, laughing like teenagers sneaking out of prom?" Her face hardened. "You're being ridiculous. Do you even hear yourself? You sound paranoid." I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. "Don't turn this on me. I saw you, Jessica. I was there." Her mouth opened and closed like she couldn't find the words. Finally, she said, "I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? Then why don't you explain it to me? Or better yet, why don't I call Ryan's wife and see what she thinks about your little work meeting?" That hit its mark. Her mask cracked, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "You wouldn't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Try me," I said, pulling out my phone and scrolling to the number Mike had given me. Jessica's composure shattered. "All right, fine. Is that what you want?" "Yes, I kissed him once. It was stupid and meaningless." "Okay. Just a friendly kiss at the corporate party." That's all it was. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity of her lie. "A friendly kiss?" I repeated. "You're telling me it was just a friendly kiss? But my detective already has photos of you walking into a hotel room with him." Her face turned bright red, and for a moment she was speechless. Then the anger came. "A detective? Are you serious? What kind of husband spies on his own wife? Do you have any idea how insane you sound?" "Insane?" I said, my voice rising. "Insane is lying to my face for months and thinking I wouldn't figure it out. Insane is risking our marriage for some sleazy affair with a coworker." Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned venomous. "You know what? Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't have needed someone like Ryan to talk to." That hit me like a slap to the face. The sheer gall of her trying to blame me for her actions left me speechless. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice low. "I gave you everything, Jessica, everything, and this is how you repay me?" She crossed her arms, defiance written across her face. "Well, maybe I'm not the only one who's been unhappy. Did you ever think about that for a moment?" All I could do was stare at her. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone now felt like a stranger, standing in my kitchen. "Pack your things," I said finally, my voice icy calm. "You're leaving." Her jaw dropped. "You can't be serious?" "Dead serious," I replied, turning away from her. "Get out. We're done." The sound of her footsteps echoing behind me was the last thing I needed to hear. The only response I needed was the sound of her footsteps retreating up the stairs. Jessica's heavy steps echoed as she stormed upstairs, each one louder than the last, filled with fury. I could hear drawers slamming as she began shoving her belongings into a suitcase. I stayed downstairs, gripping the edge of the dining table so tightly that my knuckles went white. I needed to stay composed, to keep control, but it felt impossible as my life was falling apart in real time. After 10 minutes of hearing her rant and stomp around, she finally appeared at the top of the stairs, dragging her suitcase behind her. Her expression was a mixture of rage and disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend why I wasn't giving in to her excuses. "So this is how it's going to be," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You're kicking me out of my own house because you can't handle the truth." I stood up to face her, keeping my voice calm but firm. "You're damn right I'm throwing you out. You don't get to disrespect me, lie to my face, and then act like you're the victim." Her eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "You think you're so perfect, huh? Do you even know how exhausting it is being married to you? Always so uptight, always needing to be in control. Maybe if you weren't so—" I cut her off, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't try to turn this around on me. You're the one who cheated, Jessica. You're the one who lied. You don't get to rewrite the story just because it's convenient." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Ryan. And guess what? He actually listens to me. He doesn't treat me like some accessory to his perfect little life." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see how much they affected me. "You're unbelievable," I said. "Do you even hear yourself? You destroyed our marriage, and your excuse is that I didn't listen enough? That's pathetic, Jessica." She shrugged as if none of this mattered to her anymore. "Maybe it is, but at least I'm not the one who hired a private detective like some paranoid psycho. You want to talk about pathetic?" I shot back. "Look in the mirror." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shout. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with rage. For a moment, it looked like she might say something else, but then she grabbed her suitcase and stormed toward the door. As she reached it, she turned back, her eyes blazing. "You're going to regret this," she said, her voice cold. "You think you're the victim, but you're not. You're just a control freak who couldn't see what was right in front of him." I didn't reply. I just stood there, watching as she walked out, slamming the door behind her. The sound reverberated through the house, leaving behind an eerie silence. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the door, trying to process what had just happened. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and betrayal, but underneath it all, there was a strange sense of relief. She was gone. I walked back to the dining table and picked up the photos again, studying them with fresh eyes. The woman in those pictures wasn't the Jessica I thought I knew. She was a stranger, someone who had been leading a double life right under my nose. My phone buzzed, interrupting the silence. It was a text from Mike. "Got more on Ryan. Call me when you're ready." I stared at the screen, a new wave of anger rising within me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Jessica might have left, but the fallout was just beginning. After she left, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Her absence lingered in the air, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind of silence that crawls under your skin, leaving you with the eerie feeling that something is still watching. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination or the weight of everything I had just learned, but Mike's text about Ryan had me pacing the living room, my phone clenched tightly in my hand. I debated whether to call him immediately or take some time to think, but curiosity and anger won out. Tell me what you found, I said as soon as he answered. Mike didn't waste time. Ryan's got a history, a messy one. He's been involved in this kind of thing before, affairs with coworkers, the whole 9 yards. 3 years ago, his wife filed for divorce after catching him with another woman, but they reconciled. Why would she stay with him? I muttered, half to myself. Money, Mike replied flatly. He's got plenty of it. She didn't want to lose her lifestyle, so she took him back on the condition that he'd clean up his act. Looks like he didn't. The pieces started to fall into place. Ryan wasn't just some random fling for Jessica. He was a pro at this, someone who knew exactly how to manipulate people to get what he wanted. Anything else? I asked, my voice tight. Yeah, Mike hesitated. This part might be harder to hear. The photos you got, they weren't just taken by chance. Someone hired a private investigator to follow Jessica, but it wasn't you. My stomach dropped. What do you mean it wasn't me? I mean Ryan's wife hired someone. She's been on to him for months, and she's the one who sent you the photos. Looks like she found your name and address through some shared connection, maybe a company event or social media. She wanted you to know, probably to cause trouble for Ryan and Jessica. I sat down hard on the couch, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about me and Jessica. It was a chess game, and I was just a pawn. So what now? I asked. That depends, Mike said. You want to let this go and move on, or do you want to fight back? The answer was immediate. I want to fight back. Mike gave a short laugh. Figured. All right, I've got a few ideas. First, you need to talk to Ryan's wife. She's on your side in this, whether she realizes it or not. I'll send you her contact info. Second, you need to lock down your finances. Affairs like this tend to turn messy fast. After hanging up, I stared at the number Mike had sent me for what felt like hours. I wasn't sure what to say to Ryan's wife, or if she'd even want to talk to me. But the need for answers outweighed my hesitation. When I finally called, a soft voice answered. Hello? Hi, I said, my throat dry. This is complicated, but my name is David, and I think we have something in common. Your husband, Ryan, and my wife, Jessica. There was a long pause on the other end, then she let out a quiet, bitter laugh. I was wondering when you'd call. We met at a coffee shop that afternoon. Her name was Laura, and she was every bit as poised and polished as you'd expect from someone married to a man like Ryan. But beneath the calm exterior, there was a sharpness in her eyes, a quiet fury that mirrored my own. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Laura said, stirring her coffee. I didn't know what else to do. Ryan lied to me so many times, and when I found out about Jessica, I needed someone else to see what he was doing, someone who wouldn't just brush it off. Why didn't you confront him yourself? I asked. She looked down, her fingers tightening around her mug. I did, and he promised me, like always, that it was nothing, that it was a misunderstanding. But I knew better. I nodded, understanding all too well what it felt like to be lied to by someone you trusted. Do you know how long it's been going on? I asked. Laura hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were more photos, time-stamped and labeled. They went back 6 months. 6 months, I whispered, my voice hollow. She nodded. Maybe longer. I stopped digging after that. I couldn't take it anymore. For the first time, I saw tears glisten in her eyes. But she blinked them away quickly. What are you going to do? Laura's jaw tightened. I'm done. I've already filed for divorce. Ryan doesn't know yet, but he will soon. What about you? I thought about Jessica, her lies, her betrayal, and her defiance. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, but for the first time, I felt clarity. I'm done too, I replied. Laura offered a faint smile, a silent understanding passing between us. By the time I left the coffee shop, the path ahead was clear. Jessica might have thought she could walk away without consequences, but she was mistaken. The fallout wasn't over. It had only just begun. While she was busy nursing her wounds and probably spinning her version of events to anyone who would listen, I was preparing a response she wouldn't see coming. I spent the next few days working closely with Mike and Laura. If Jessica and Ryan wanted to play games, they were about to discover they'd misjudged me. The first move came from Laura. She had been meticulous, gathering evidence over the months and quietly setting the stage for her divorce. but with my involvement, she now had more leverage than ever. She drafted a letter to Ryan's company's HR department detailing his workplace affair with Jessica, down to every last detail. Attached were the photos, along with a timeline of his indiscretions, including not only Jessica, but 2 other women from previous years. Corporate policy doesn't take kindly to this kind of thing, Laura said, emailing me the draft. It was true. I had done my homework, and Ryan's company had a strict code of conduct. His behavior could cost him his job and reputation. While Laura prepared to launch her strike, I focused on Jessica. I hadn't spoken to her since I kicked her out, but I knew she wasn't taking the situation seriously. Mutual friends started reaching out, saying she was spreading rumors about me, calling me controlling, paranoid, and even abusive. I didn't bother defending myself. The truth would come out soon enough. Mike had been busy digging deeper into Jessica's activities. He found credit card charges for hotel rooms, dinners at upscale restaurants, and even a spa weekend she claimed was a work retreat. It was all there in black and white, a paper trail of her lies. But the real bombshell came when Mike discovered where she was staying. She's with Ryan, he told me during a late-night call. He's got a rental downtown, and she moved in 2 days ago. I gripped the phone so tightly I thought it might break. She's living with him. Looks like it, Mike said. And here's the kicker. Ryan doesn't know Laura's about to file for divorce. He thinks he's in the clear. That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with my divorce attorney. I brought every piece of evidence Mike had gathered, along with Laura's photos and notes. My attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Ellen, wasted no time. "This is ironclad," she said, flipping through the documents. "She'll have no grounds to contest this. Do you want to push for infidelity as the main cause?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. Ellen nodded. "We'll hit her with the papers first thing Monday morning. She won't know what hit her." But I wasn't finished. I wanted Jessica to feel the weight of her actions, not just in court, but in every area of her life. With Laura's assistance, I sent an anonymous tip to her employer about the affair. Jessica had been using company resources, her work phone, her expense accounts, to cover her tracks. It was a violation of company policies, and Laura assured me they would take it seriously. "I hope they fire her," Laura said, her voice cold. "She deserves it." By the time Monday arrived, the trap was set. Ellen filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning, delivering them to Jessica at her new address, Ryan's rental. I would have paid anything to see her face when she opened that envelope. An hour later, Laura's letter landed in Ryan's HR department. Within minutes, she received a call from his boss, thanking her for bringing the issue to their attention. Jessica called me that afternoon, her number flashing on my phone like a warning. I let it ring, then she called again, and again. By the 5th call, I picked up. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, my tone void of emotion. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed. "Do you think you can just destroy my life because you're bitter?" I laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "Destroy your life, Jessica? You did that all on your own. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." She sputtered, clearly caught off guard. "You had no right to involve my job or Ryan's." "Funny," I said. "I could say the same about you involving another man in our marriage." There was a long silence, broken only by her ragged breathing. Finally, she spoke. "You're going to regret this." "No, Jessica," I said calmly. "The only one regretting anything here is you. Goodbye." I hung up, feeling an unfamiliar sense of closure. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I had taken control, and there was no turning back. As I sat back, staring at the now quiet phone, I realized something important. Jessica and Ryan thought they could manipulate those around them without facing consequences. But they were wrong. This was just the beginning of their reckoning. By the time Tuesday came around, everything was in motion, and the fallout was moving faster than I had anticipated. I woke up to a series of messages from Mike, each one more satisfying than the last. "Mike, Ryan was called into an HR meeting this morning," one of his messages read. "Sources say he didn't leave happy. Mike, Jessica's company is investigating her expense accounts. She's under review. Mike, Laura filed her divorce paperwork. Ryan's about to have a real bad day." The satisfaction I felt was cold and sharp, like a blade finally finding its mark. But there was more to be done. Around noon, Laura called. Her voice was calm, but tinged with quiet glee. Ryan knows, she said. He came home ranting about how his vindictive wife ruined his career. I didn't even have to say a word. He's packing his things now. What about Jessica? I asked, leaning back in my chair. Laura let out a dry laugh. She showed up here about an hour ago. I guess Ryan hadn't told her everything yet. She looked completely blindsided when I handed her a copy of the divorce papers. I could almost picture it. Jessica, standing in Laura's pristine living room, her carefully crafted world crumbling around her. What did she say? I asked. She tried to play innocent, of course. Said she had no idea Ryan was married, that he told her they were separated. I smiled and told her, she's welcome to him now. Let them ruin each other. Her words hung in the air, a testament to how far both of us had come in the past week. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new message from Ellen, my divorce attorney. Jessica's been served. Her attorney called to say she wants to talk. Talk? I said aloud. I ignored the message for hours, focusing on work to keep my mind busy. But by evening, curiosity got the better of me. I called her. David, Jessica said as soon as she picked up, her voice softer than I'd heard in weeks. Can we meet, please? I want to explain. I almost laughed. Explain? After all this? But something in me needed to hear her try. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to see how far she would go to twist the truth. Fine, I said. Tomorrow. Coffee shop by my office. None. The next day, she was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked different, not confident or defiant like before, but small, almost timid. David, she said. Thank you for coming, I said as I sat down across from her. I didn't answer right away. I simply let the silence stretch between us, waiting for her to break it. I know you're angry, she began, her voice quivering slightly. And you have every right to be. I made mistakes, I know that. But it's all spiraled out of control. The investigator, the HR reports, the divorce papers. Why are you doing this to me? To you? I repeated, leaning forward. Jessica, you lied to me. You cheated on me, and when I confronted you, you blamed me. Do you even hear yourself right now? Her eyes welled up with tears, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, her voice breaking. It started out innocent, just talking, you know? And then things got complicated. I didn't know how to stop. Complicated? I asked, my voice dripping with disbelief. Jessica, you didn't complicate anything. You made choices. You lied. You betrayed me. And now you're facing the consequences. That's not my fault. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. Please, David, she whispered. Don't let it end like this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. I still love you. Her words stung like a slap, but not in the way she intended. They didn't stir any hope or nostalgia in me. Instead, they felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to regain control. No, Jessica, I said, pulling my hand away. You don't love me. You loved the idea of me. You loved what I provided for you, stability, security. But you threw all of that away for some fling. And now you want me to fix it for you? She flinched, tears falling freely. I made a mistake. I know I did. But can't we just move on? Start over? I stared at her, searching for any trace of the woman I once loved. But all I saw was someone who had destroyed everything we built and refused to take responsibility for it. No, I said firmly. We're done, Jessica. I've already filed for divorce, and nothing you say will change that. Her face crumpled, and for a brief moment, I thought she might argue. But instead, she nodded and wiped her tears with a shaky hand. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. I already have, I said, standing up. As I walked out of the coffee shop, an unfamiliar sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was truly free. Jessica's plea didn't haunt me like I thought it would. Instead, it solidified something deep inside me, an unshakable resolve to see this through. For years, I had been the one holding our life together, while she chipped away at its foundation. Now, it was time to take back what was mine. That evening, as I sat in the quiet of my home, Mike called. His voice carried a note of triumph I hadn't heard before. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. "Lay it on me," I replied, sipping my drink. "Ryan's life is falling apart faster than I expected," Mike continued. HR didn't just reprimand him, they fired him on the spot. Apparently, the affair violated a non-fraternization policy, and Laura's evidence sealed the deal. Word's already spreading through the company. I couldn't help but smile. "Good, he deserves it." "Oh, it gets better," Mike added. "Remember that rental property he was using to play house with Jessica? Turns out it wasn't in his name. It belongs to one of his business partners, who wasn't happy to find out it was being used for extracurricular activities. Ryan's getting evicted." I leaned back, letting the satisfaction settle in. Ryan's downfall was poetic. Everything he tried to hide was unraveling, and Jessica was right in the middle of it. "What about Jessica?" I asked. "She's not far behind," Mike said. "Her company's audit found some questionable charges. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise red flags. She's been suspended while they investigate further. The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't need to do anything else. Their actions were doing all the work for me. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I contacted Ellen to discuss the division of assets. "I want to make this as clean as possible," I told her. "She doesn't deserve a dime more than what she's legally entitled to." Ellen, ever the professional, assured me she'd handle it. But as we went over the details, she paused. "Have you considered what you'll do if Jessica fights this?" she asked. "If she pushes for more?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Then we'll fight back. She has no leg to stand on, and she knows it. By the end of the week, Jessica's attorney reached out with a proposal that was laughably ambitious. She wanted spousal support, claiming she'd sacrificed her career to support our marriage. Ellen called me as soon as she received the letter. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" she asked. "Absolutely not," I said. "Push back. She doesn't get to betray me and then act like the victim." The days turned into weeks as the legal battle took shape. Jessica's once flawless image was crumbling under the weight of her own decisions. Our mutual friends began reaching out, not to take her side, but to apologize for ever believing her lies about me. "I had no idea what she was really like," one of them said over the phone. "She always seemed so put together, but now it all makes sense. It wasn't just my friends who saw her differently. Jessica's family, who had once adored me, started reaching out too. Her sister called one evening, her voice heavy with regret. "I'm so sorry for everything," she said. "We didn't know what was really going on. Jessica made it sound like you were the problem." "I appreciate the apology," I replied, "but this isn't about taking sides. It's about moving forward, and I meant it. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. Watching Jessica and Ryan's lives fall apart wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. What I truly wanted was peace. A chance to rebuild my life without the weight of their betrayal hanging over me. By the end of the month, the divorce papers were finalized. Jessica didn't fight back as much as I'd expected, likely because she didn't have the resources to drag it out. When the final documents arrived, I felt a wave of relief. It was over. As I packed away the last remnants of our shared life, photos, mementos, the little things that once meant so much, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness for what we'd lost. Anger for what she'd done. But also hope. For the first time in years, the future felt wide open. The reckoning was complete, and now it was time to rebuild. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood in my now quiet home and let the weight of it all settle over me. Paper signed, assets divided, and Jessica officially out of my life. It should have felt like the end, but instead, it felt like the beginning of something entirely new. The first thing I did was pack a bag and head to the mountains. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not Mike, not Laura, not even my family. I needed space to breathe, reflect, and let go. For 3 days, I hiked trails I'd never walked before, surrounded only by towering trees and the crisp, clean air. With every step, I felt lighter, as if shedding layers of pain and anger that had been weighing me down. On the third night, sitting by a crackling fire under a sky full of stars, I thought about the man I had been before all of this. the version of myself that Jessica had met and fallen in love with. He was hopeful, open, and full of plans for the future. Somewhere along the way, I had lost that version of myself. But out there in the stillness of the wilderness, I realized something important. I could find him again. When I returned home, I began making changes. First, I redecorated the house. Every trace of Jessica, the photos, the furniture she'd chosen, the little decorative pieces that had once made the house ours, was packed away and replaced with things that felt like me. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. This was my space now, and I was reclaiming it. Next, I threw myself into my work. I had always loved what I did, but during my marriage, I'd let my career take a back seat to Jessica's needs and ambitions. Now, I poured my energy into new projects and earned a promotion within months. It wasn't just about the money or recognition. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive on my own. But the most important change came when I started reconnecting with people. For years, my world had revolved around Jessica, and I hadn't realized how much I had neglected my friendships. Slowly, I began reaching out, grabbing beers with Mike, catching up with old college buddies, and even joining a local hiking group. It was through that hiking group that I met someone new. Her name was Emily. She wasn't like Jessica. There was no flashy charm, no polished perfection. Emily was warm, grounded, and genuine in a way that caught me off guard. She loved the outdoors, worked as a graphic designer, and had a laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. We started off as friends, trading stories about our favorite trails, swapping music recommendations. But as the weeks turned into months, something deeper began to grow between us. One evening, after a long hike that left both of us breathless and laughing, she turned to me with a smile. "You seem different lately," she said. "Different how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Lighter," she said simply. "Like you've let go of something heavy." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's expectations, lies, or betrayal. I was just me. Our friendship eventually turned into something more. It wasn't rushed or forced. It unfolded naturally, like it was meant to be. Emily didn't just fill the empty spaces in my life. She helped me see that those spaces weren't empty at all. They were opportunities to grow, to build something new. Looking back, I can't say I'm grateful for what Jessica did. Her betrayal left scars, and those scars will always be part of me. But I can say that I'm grateful for what came after, the strength I found, the lessons I learned, and the life I've built since. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone going through something similar, it's this. Don't let betrayal define you. It's not the end of your story. It's just one chapter, and you get to decide what comes next. For me, the next chapter is about love, not just with Emily, but with myself. And for the first time in a long time, I can honestly say I'm happy.